Fact sheet. President Donald J. Trump develops new strategy to counter domestic terrorism and organized political violence. But here's where it gets controversial. President Trump signed a National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM, to tackle organized political violence and domestic terrorism, framing it as a national security crisis. The memo outlines a multi-pronged strategy to disrupt these threats, emphasizing collaboration across federal agencies and a focus on preventing harm before it occurs. The NSPM mandates the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Joint Terrorism Task Force, JTTFs, to coordinate a nationwide effort to investigate, prosecute, and dismantle entities and individuals involved in political violence and intimidation. This includes radicalization, recruitment, funding, and the broader ecosystem of illegal activities that fuel such violence. The strategy targets every stage of the threat, from early-stage radicalization to the final acts of violence, ensuring no aspect is overlooked. This approach will prioritize politically motivated acts, including doxing campaigns, swatting, and property crimes, as these are among the most dangerous forms of organized terror. The guidance also highlights behaviors and patterns common to groups that orchestrate these acts, aiming to identify and neutralize threats before they escalate. The NSPM requires the Attorney General to prosecute all federal crimes tied to organized political violence, including funding and coordination. It also directs the Attorney General to issue clear directives to law enforcement, ensuring domestic terrorism priorities align with politically driven attacks. These guidelines will help distinguish between legitimate protests and violent extremism, guiding investigations with precision. The Secretary of the Treasury is tasked with identifying and dismantling financial networks that fund domestic terrorism, while the IRS Commissioner is directed to prevent tax-exempt entities from supporting such activities. Violators will be referred to the Department of Justice for further action. The Attorney General is instructed to recommend groups meeting specific criteria for potential designation as domestic terrorist organizations. This process ensures that only those directly linked to violent acts are labeled as such, avoiding false accusations. The NSPM formally designates domestic terrorism as a national priority area, allocating resources and funding to protect citizens and institutions vital to democracy. This strategic move underscores the severity of the threat and the government's commitment to addressing it head-on. And this is the part most people miss. The surge in political violence in the U.S. isn't random. It's part of a calculated, coordinated campaign targeting specific groups, often with the goal of destabilizing law enforcement and undermining the rule of law. Recent events, such as the assassination of conservative leader Charlie Kirk and the 2024 attempts on President Trump, highlight the growing danger to public safety and democratic principles. The 2024 attacks on ICE officers, which rose by over 1,000% since January 2025, demonstrate how violent rhetoric can fuel mass unrest. A shooting at an ICE facility in Dallas last week resulted in multiple casualties, underscoring the real-world consequences of these threats. These acts emerge from a deliberate strategy to isolate and dehumanize targeted individuals, justifying violence against law enforcement and federal operations. Groups like Antifa are often framed as anti-fascist or anti-American, but their actions are deeply rooted in hate and chaos. The NSPM explicitly labels Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, reflecting the administration's stance on combating extremism despite its ideological claims. Why is this a big deal? Political violence has already caused immense harm, eroding trust in institutions and challenging the core values of freedom, justice, and unity. President Trump's administration emphasizes restoring these values through initiatives like the America 250 Task Force, which promotes patriotism and civic education. By strengthening free speech protections and declaring Washington, D.C. a crime emergency, Trump aims to reclaim control over public spaces and ensure accountability for those who threaten stability. We must stop the spread of hatred, Trump said, calling on lawmakers to root out those funding and supporting violent extremism. While some argue that labeling groups as terrorists is overly punitive, others see it as necessary to protect citizens from escalating violence. The debate over whether such measures are effective or merely rebranding extremism remains a contentious issue. As the nation grapples with these challenges, the question becomes, how can we balance national security with the protection of civil liberties? And how can we ensure that our laws reflect the values we hold dear? The answer may lie in a renewed commitment to transparency, accountability, and a shared vision for a safer, more just society.